It seems inevitable that at some point the Atlanta Braves are going to sign a veteran starter. Just how old will that veteran be and which one makes the most sense? I'll answer that question and many more on today's Mailbag episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop of All. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, then hit that thumbs up button and leave me a comment down below, as it does help out the show a ton whenever you do those things. If you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. It is our Mailbag Friday episode here at Locked On Braves. Got 20 questions going to answer on today's episode. Wide variety of questions looking at veteran starters. Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander. Could it be one of them or somebody else? Ozzie Albies and his leadership role now with the leadership that has left the Atlanta Braves the last several years. How important is that? And a lot of questions on prospects, trade targets, free agent targets, so much to still answer in this part of the offseason. We'll do that all on today's episode. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Thank you all for joining me here live on today's episode. Thanks to BOIs for subscribing. Really appreciate that. I'm going to jump right into the questions because, again, we've got a lot to get to. We're into January now. Not much has happened, and you still are able to send me 20 or 20-plus questions every podcast. So thank you so much for doing that. Going to start out just going from top to bottom like I usually do. There's no real order for this. But the first one from Hayden Harris says, who should I take in my dynasty draft this weekend? I pick fourth. Two names that come to mind for me, assuming that Ohtani and Judge are most likely going to be 1, 2, or at least 2 of the top 3, I would assume. For me, it's either names are eluding me at the moment. Bobby Witt Jr. is who I would take, or Gunnar Henderson. You get 2 young studs that I think are going to be superstars in the game for a long time. That's how I would rank them. If either one of those are available to you at 4, which I think one of them should be, I would take one of those 2 guys. Dustin Mounts, if the Braves sign or trade for a starter, reliever, and outfielder, who would be the first cut at? Question I had to follow up on this. The question that Dustin is ultimately answering here is, if the Braves do make some moves and nobody comes off the 40-man roster, who are the guys that are likely to get cut? So just quickly running down the list of names on here, guys who I think potentially could get let go if they do end up making some moves. And again, it depends on, where it is. You make a move for an outfielder. In my mind, Luke Williams, Carlos Rodriguez, those guys could go on the roster. Maybe even Eli White. I think there's 3 options there that you could look at that could go. Christian Cairo, the guy that got in the Rule 5 draft, I'd be shocked if he is on the 26-man roster to open the season. And then I think there's several pitchers you could perhaps look at. VR, the guy that got in the Rule 5 draft, although I think he's going to hang around. Gillespie, another guy they just picked up. Davis Daniels, the guy they just picked up. Those will be some of the first options for me of guys to get let go if roster space is needed when hopefully a move does happen. Carlos Paulino says, it seems Sandy Alcantara is being shopped by the Marlins and is likely going either to the Orioles or Tigers. If it comes down to having to move Murphy, either for prospects with a third team or as part of the trade, would you make that deal for Alcantara? I followed up here trying to get clarification on which Murphy they were talking about, but Carlos hasn't responded to me yet. I'm assuming in this they're talking about Sean Murphy. I'm not trading Sean Murphy. I'm not handing over Drake Baldwin may be it. He may be him. I don't know. But I'm not handing the reins over to a rookie catcher that has not proven himself at the big league level. And the Braves aren't going to do that either. So Sean Murphy is not getting traded. And if it's Owen Murphy, I would do Owen Murphy or Sandy Alcantara. I like Owen Murphy. I also don't think the Braves are going to be trading for Sandy Alcantara. I don't think the Marlins are moving him right now. I think you'd be selling low on him. I think if they are going to move him, it'd be during the season once he kind of reestablishes himself. Otto says, do you think signing so many of our young guys to early extensions has actually hurt us? maybe it prevents us from bringing in new attitudes and hungry players versus maybe a few have gone complacent. I'm going to answer the second question first. I don't think these players have gotten complacent by any means. I don't think signing these big deals has made them complacent. You talk to these guys, you see them, you watch them play. They want to win, and they're hungry to win and be great. So I don't think signing these guys to deals while they're young has affected their motivation in any way. It's given them financial security, but I don't think it's these are baseball players. If you played baseball, you played any type of sport, you step on that field, there's a pride factor to it, and you want to win. And these guys want to win, and they want to compete. So I don't think it's affected it in that way at all. And I don't think it's hurt the Braves in terms of being able to go out and make other moves either. I think it has perhaps affected them with the luxury tax a little bit. Although that's coming back around now where it could be in favor of the Braves. Whereas before, I think of Michael Harris was making $5 million, but his AAV was, $15 million or whatever it was. I know I don't have those numbers correct, but you had a situation where you had a Spencer Strider, you had a Michael Harris who, they weren't making a ton of money, but because of their long-term deal and the AAV of that deal, it was making the luxury tax higher than what they were actually making that year. But that's coming back around where those players are now actually getting paid more, and the AAV is going to be less than what they're actually getting paid. I think, and maybe I'm going beyond what Otto's question is here. I think maybe some of the frustration we're having as fans is that you locked up all this talent early, and you locked them up young, and you've locked up this core to where we're going into, now multiple off seasons where you really don't have that many holes to plug. I mean, I know right now we're frustrated because the Braves haven't done anything, but we're still talking about a team that, okay, you could make a move in the outfield, and that certainly would be helpful. You could look to make an upgrade at shortstop, and that would be helpful, but you could live with Orlando Arcia there batting ninth if everybody else is doing their job. You have a great rotation, but you certainly could use some depth to help you get through the season. You have a great bullpen, but you certainly could use some depth, to help you get through the season. We're talking about a team that already has a core in place and is just needing to make some depth moves, essentially, is what we're talking about. If Acuna comes back and is healthy, you're potentially looking at an outfield of Kelenic, Harris, and Acuna, which is fine. If Strider comes back healthy, you're looking at a rotation of Sales, Strider, Lopez, Schwellenbach, and you certainly need somebody for that fifth spot. But that's a good rotation. Everybody in the bullpen stays healthy. It's still Iglesias, Johnson, Bummer, Lee, Holmes, Daysville. There's still some good players there. And locking up these players young into these extensions, it's put you in a situation where you're going into every offseason and you have a core built, and you're just looking to add some depth to that core. Now, I think what a lot of Braves fans, myself included, were hoping that you lock up these guys early and it frees you up to then go out and make some big splashes in free agency. And that just hasn't happened. AAWX says, are you good with Trump being the backup to Murph and let Baldwin start the year in AAA? Or do you bring Baldwin up to back up Murph? Or do you want to sign a cheap catcher and start Baldwin in AAA? I want all of those things. So I'm fine with Chadwick Trump being the backup catcher. I think Chadwick has done a fantastic job when he's been called upon. And it's, what they talked about a lot last year. Pitchers like throwing to him when he had his run last year. He seems to always come up with some big hits whenever he's up. So I am perfectly fine with Chadwick Trump being the backup catcher, assuming that Sean Murphy's going to catch, 2 out of 3 games. He's going to catch 2/3 of the games. And that needs to be the case. So I'm perfectly fine with Chadwick Trump being the backup catcher to begin the year. Start Drake Baldwin off in AAA. Let him continue to gain some experience there. If he hits the ground running and takes off, maybe an injury happens or something like that, whatever, you can give Trump or you can give Baldwin an opportunity, but I would start Baldwin in AAA. I'm fine with Trump as a backup, but I would also go out and get a veteran starter on a minor league deal for multiple reasons. One, you just always need that veteran catcher depth. But if you do start Baldwin at AAA and you can get a veteran, I don't know that Yasmani Grandal wants to go to AAA at this point in his career, but somebody like that, and you send them to AAA along with Baldwin, and you help them kind of mold him and shape him, and it just helps him even more. So I would like to see all of those things happen. I'm fine with Murphy getting 2/3 of the starts at catcher with Trump being a backup to start once or twice a week. I'm fine with Baldwin starting the year in AAA, and then maybe you call him up later in the season. And I'm perfectly fine with finding a veteran catcher that you can stash in the minor leagues to be there for insurance and depth, but also help Drake Baldwin along the way. All right, a lot more questions to get to on today's episode. We'll continue answering those questions here next. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You can head on over to FanDuel.com today and check out the odds they have out there. Quickly looking for the Super Bowl odds that they have at the moment. The Kansas City Chiefs are plus 360. The Detroit Lions, what year are we in? They are plus 470 to win the Super Bowl. And your Atlanta Falcons not listed on the top here, as their season might be over here pretty quickly. They also have MLB odds out there for 2025. The Dodgers are your World Series favorites right now, with the Braves behind them with the second highest odds. Again, you can check all that out at FanDuel.com, and you can get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Also, please make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way that you play. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen, solely getting you caught up with everything happening around Major League Baseball. Not a lot to talk about at the moment. It's not just the Braves who have been quiet here recently over the holidays. It's pretty much been everybody, but I expect that to change next week because there's still a lot that has to be done. And again, hopefully the Braves are part of that. We'll keep our fingers crossed. I'll be here. If something does happen over the weekend, I'll be here to break it and talk about it and discuss. And again, we'll be back next week as well with our Minors Monday recap. If there's anybody else in the minor leagues you want me to spotlight, let me know. Certainly be glad to do that, as we're running out of some names there to talk about. Let's jump back into the questions here, though. Next one coming from E. Goldie, who says, the Braves have had a trend of signing high-priced relievers. You have mentioned you wish the Braves would leverage some of their international or their internal options as relievers so that money can be used elsewhere. Who are 3 minor league pitchers that you feel could be quality relievers? Hayden Harris is one that we're probably going to see in 2025. The guy that they just put on the 40-man roster, whose name Domingo Gonzalez, they just put on the 40-man roster, is another one. Roldy Munoz, who is on the 40-man roster. I didn't realize that, but he's already on the 40-man roster. He's got a big-time arm and closer-type stuff, so he could be there one day. So there's 3 names for you that we haven't seen yet that I think could have an impact and could have an impact in 2025. And I'm sure there's a lot of others down there in the system as well. But my whole point kind of with the internal reliever options is that it feels like the Braves hold on to this hope of a guy becoming a starter for too long. And it's knowing when is that time that we say, okay, at least for now, because we're seeing a trend at the moment where, guys are kind of failed as starter. You put them in the bullpen, they figure some things out, and then maybe you try them back in the rotation. And we've seen a lot of success with that here recently. So it doesn't mean that they're done as starters forever. But like, for instance, a Hurston Waldrop, big time stuff. We know that. You get halfway through this year with Hurston Waldrop, and it just can't figure out that command, and he can't get through 5-6 innings just because he's throwing too many pitches, walking too many batters. Try him as a reliever and see if something can click there, because he has big time stuff, and then potentially move him back in the rotation at some point. I mean, Max Fried was in the bullpen when he first came up. Spencer Strider was in the bullpen when he first came up. Sometimes it does help guys get on track a little bit to do it over shorter stints, and then you take that back into the rotation. So for me, yes, they need to do a better job of developing some relievers and getting guys up there so that you're not spending $50 million of your payroll on your bullpen, and that you're always having these internal options come up. But it's also knowing when is that time to say, okay, let's pause the development on him as a starter. Let's turn him in. He's got big time stuff. Young Carlos Lara, another one, big time stuff. If he can figure it out as a starter, you're talking about a number 2, number 3 type guy. But at what point do you say, okay, it's not really working out right now as a starter. Can we turn him into a reliever, make him a dynamite reliever at the big league level? maybe he gets on track there, and down the road, we look at turning him back into a starter at some point. The Braves have been very hesitant to make that switch. Lucas Sims is an obvious example of that. I know the Braves traded him, but a guy, first round pick, didn't really work out as a starter. They never even tried him, as far as I know, as a reliever. You trade him to Cincinnati, he becomes a pretty good reliever over there. Unfortunately, he's had some injuries since leaving. But for me, it's just knowing that time of saying, okay, we tried the starter thing. It's not quite clicking. Can we get him into a bullpen role that can help us now at the big league level? Because we know he's got really good stuff. Can he do it, for an inning stint, and then maybe at some point down the road convert him back? Dustin Mounts, a little over a month until pitchers and catchers report. Do you think over the next few weeks we start seeing a lot more moves for lower values than we have seen, since there is still a lot of players available? Or when do you think free agent prices start to drop? I think there's a chance. Certainly, players get a little bit more anxious. I just don't personally like. There doesn't seem to be a good track record of free agents, especially more of the higher priced big free agents who sign in spring training or late in the offseason, of doing well. Jordan Montgomery, Blake Snell are two examples just from last year that signed very late, got off to really bad starts in the season. Montgomery is just a wasted season, essentially, with injuries. Blake Snell eventually got on track in the second half after a disastrous start. It just doesn't ever seem to work out for guys who sign late in the offseason. So January is the month. I think we're going to see a lot happen this month and a lot of movement. So yeah, I think there'll be a lot of movement in the month of January, because you're right. There still are a lot of names out there that need to be signed. Caden Hurd, would you rather have Max Scherzer or Justin Verlander to be our fifth starter? None was not an option here, because that would probably be my choice. I just don't trust either of these guys to really give you much of anything. But if I'm choosing between those two, I think Max Scherzer still has the most upside. When he's at least been healthy, I feel like he's been more productive than Justin Verlander. You can just see the stuff ticking down for Justin Verlander over the years. The stuff for Max Scherzer still can be good. I don't know what he can give you. I don't know how much he can give you at this point. And I've had this discussion before, but I'm going to bring it up here again. I think there's several veterans that you could look to. I've talked a lot about Lance Lynn. I really think he could be a decent option for you. Certainly bringing back Charlie Morton, Jose Quintana, and then Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer. I think there's 5 veterans right there that the Braves could sign that I would be okay with. And I would put Verlander at the bottom of that list. I'd probably rank them Lance Lynn, Charlie Morton, Jose Quintana, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander. Again, it's just, if you're looking for some durability and that's really all you want, then Morton and Quintana are your picks. You're looking for somebody that maybe has a little bit left in the tank and can give you some innings, you're looking at Lance Lynn. You're looking at somebody that maybe can be upside to keep him healthy for the postseason and he can do some big things. You're looking at Max Scherzer. I don't know what you're going to get or what you're hoping to get from Justin Verlander. It's just, there's been an obvious decline for him. He's 41 years old. You certainly expect that, but he'd be at the bottom of that list for me as far as veteran starters go that the Braves could get. Of Lynn, Morton, or Quintana, I'd be happy with any of those 3. I just take whichever one you get for the least amount of money. I think they're all pretty much about the same. T Studio says, can AA still pull off a big trade with the prospects they have, and who do you think they would go after? Pablo Lopez would be at the top of my list right now if he really is available from the Twins. Could the Braves pull off a trade like that? I think they can. AJ Smith-Shawver or Hurston Waldrop are going to have to be part of that, maybe even a Drake Baldwin. But as I found out in my conversation with Grant, it sounds like the Braves are really, if they weren't going to move Drake Baldwin for Garrett Crochet, I don't know who you're trading Drake Baldwin for, which essentially tells me that Drake Baldwin's untouchable, because you're not going to move him for a guy like Crochet. Who are you going to move him for? So it would almost have to include an AJ Smith-Shawver or Hurston Waldrop and probably another top pick, maybe a Perdomo, or there are guys that I think are valuable. Basically what I'm getting to. An AJ Smith-Shawver, a Waldrop, a Drake Baldwin, those guys are valuable. Caminiti. I like J.R. Ritchie and Noah Murphy. I don't know how the rest of Major League Baseball and scouts feel about him, but I like J.R. Ritchie a lot. Jose Perdomo, Luis Guaniba, if you wanted some position players maybe to dream on. So I do think the Braves have some prospects that they could deal from to go out and get to go out and get a big time player like that, to get a move like that done. But Pablo Lopez, the first trade target that kind of came to mind for me, if he's available, that's certainly somebody that I would go after. Dan Antlers says, what are your thoughts on signing Jeff Hoffman to $339 and using him as a starter while letting AJ Smith-Shawver start the season in the big league bullpen? We can always stretch him out later, but this strategy worked for Strider and even earlier in career Max Fried. If you can get Jeff Hoffman for 3 years and less than $40 million, that needs to be done. That just needs to be done. I think that's a no-brainer. Now, as far as signing Jeff Hoffman and then using AJ Smith-Shawver in the bullpen, I don't think you have to do that. I don't think the bullpen is such dire straits that you have to go move AJ Smith-Shawver to the bullpen to start the year. Maybe later in the year, sure, but I would rather AJ Smith-Shawver just start the year in AAA, continue to work on things as a starter and earn a promotion and hopefully get to the big leagues and stick as a starter. So I don't think that signing Jeff Hoffman really does anything to AJ Smith-Shawver, but to answer your first question, yeah, if you can get Jeff Hoffman for 3 years and less than $40 million, I'd do that because he's either going to become a solid middle rotation starter for you, or he's going to become a solid setup guy that can potentially close for you in the future. Caleb Hudgens, do you think a big move will be made this month? If not, I don't think it all happens at all. Depends on what you mean by big. Like signing Tanner Scott, it would be a big move because it's going to be, 60, 70 plus $1 million. So it would be a big move. But again, as I talked about on yesterday's podcast, it can't be the only move. For me, a big move would be trading for a Pablo Lopez, trading for a Luis Robert, something like that. I would consider that, a big move. Signing a free agent to the bullpen, whether it be a Hoffman or a Scott, it'd be great. And I think you could definitely categorize it as a big move. But to answer your question, yeah, I'm going to be optimistic and say that there is a big move coming this month from the Atlanta Braves. Let me know if you agree in the comment section below. All right, we'll get to the rest of your questions here next. Got about 10 more to get to. We'll try to do that quickly here next. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event, and you don't when you use Gametime. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets to all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices. You can get a view from your seat and their best price guarantee. Though with the view from your seat, you know exactly what you're going to be looking at. If you're thinking about checking out Wrigley or Boston, going to Fenway Park, you want to make sure you don't get that obstructed view. You can get a view right there from your seat in the app. You can filter it so you get all-in prices, no surprises. When you get to the checkout screen, you know exactly what you're going to be paying, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. It is that simple. And the Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. You find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's jump back into the questions here because I still got several more to get to. Caden Hurd says, how many years would you be willing to wait and watch Cam Caminiti before you are willing to trade him? And if you were to trade him this year, what would the return have to be for you to be happy? To trade Cam Caminiti, all right, to answer your first question, for me, for a high school pitcher, it's 3 years. I think you have to give them 3 years to really know what you have and what your expectations of them are. High school pitchers are very raw. Some of them, again, you can try to dream on what they could be, but you don't really know until you get your hands on them and see them against professional hitters. So for me, it's always 3 years for a high schooler. I don't care how high they are drafted. You're talking about a 17, 18-year-old. Cam Caminiti, I believe he was somebody that reclassified, so he's really young for the class. I think for any high schooler, it's at least 3 years. You look at the examples of J.R. Ritchie and Owen Murphy. First professional seasons, they were just okay. Their second professional season for J.R. Ritchie, he broke out, and then he had Tommy John surgery. Same thing for Owen Murphy. In his third year, he kind of broke out, but then he had Tommy John surgery. So for me, it's really 3 years for any high school pitcher before I think you have an idea of what they could be. If you were to trade him this year, it'd have to be a haul. I don't say a haul, but it'd have to be a legitimate all-star level type of player that has at least a couple years of control before I would give up Cam Caminiti. But let me know if you disagree. And And it's not, look, I'm certainly hopeful for Cam Caminiti, but there's a chance he becomes nothing. There's a chance he's a number 3 starter, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But I think you'd be giving up on that potential really early. And I'd like to at least know what you have and what that potential is. Quintino, what kind of package would it take to pick up Lawrence Butler from the A's? Doubt they'll trade him. He would fit perfectly with MH2 and Acuna in the outfield. I agree. He'd be a great get in the outfield, young, athletic. I don't think the A's are trading him. I also agree with that. And I think the package for him, I think it would take a lot. I think it would take probably an AJ Smith-Shawver or a Waldrop, and then, maybe a lottery ticket on one of their international signings, maybe a Luis Guanipa. For me, if I'm the A's, it's going to take a lot. The A's aren't always the smartest organization, so maybe it doesn't. But for me, it would take a lot to get Lawrence Butler. PJ's Braves, assuming he stays healthy, what are your expectations for Ozzie this season? If Ozzie stays healthy, I expect him to do what he's always done, be a 3 to 4 WAR player, 25 to 30 home runs. Again, every year that Ozzie's been healthy, he's been an all-star level talent. And I still expect that from him if he can stay healthy all year long. Chris 1414, what are the top trade targets for outfields at this stage in the offseason? I mentioned one earlier. Luis Robert is probably the biggest one out there, and I think he's an unknown. And he's somebody that can't stay healthy, but certainly there's a lot of potential there with him. Other names that come to mind, Mike Yastrzemski of the Giants, Wilyer Abreu of the Red Sox. There's some rumblings that maybe they might move him earlier in the offseason. Don't know where that stands. But those are some of the first names that come to mind for me in terms of outfield trade targets. LeBronathan Jr. says, who would you rather have on the team currently, 2017 Emilio Bonifacio or 2013 BJ Upton? I cannot watch BJ Upton play again in a Braves uniform. So I'm going to take Emilio. Give me the switch hitter that's going to be your 26th guy on the bench, and if everything goes right, you're not going to see him on the field. So give me Emilio Bonifacio. The Chosen One says, would you agree that the undisputed leader of the Braves clubhouse is Ozzie Albies due to his production, tenure, tutelage under Freeman, and his ability to communicate with Latin and American players? I do think Ozzie is probably the top leader on this team. Definitely one of the most respected people in the clubhouse. I just don't know that I would consider him a leader. I don't think he's somebody that's going to get out and give a speech in the middle of the season when things are going rough. But he definitely keeps things loose. Other thing with Ozzie is he's got to be there. And that's been the problem with Ozzie. He certainly is one of the leaders and somebody that everybody in that clubhouse respects, but it's hard to listen to somebody. It's why it's hard for a pitcher to be a leader too. Like Charlie Morton certainly is considered a leader. I think Chris Sale would be considered a leader at this point, but it's just hard when you play every 5th day. And it's hard when you're a position player and you're not out there competing to be that leader. So you just have to be out there. But I definitely agree. Ozzie is one of the key leaders for this team because he can communicate with so many players. He keeps everybody loose. But again, I just don't know if he's that outspoken guy. I don't see him giving that speech. I think Austin Riley, I think it's time for him to step up and kind of be that guy. But Ozzie is certainly one of those people, and he's gonna have to step up too. CJ Palmer, do you think free agent prices are temporarily inflated this offseason or here to stay? If these prices are here to stay, it seems the faster than Org accepts the new reality, the more options they'll have to improve. I remember when Harper's $330 million contract felt crazy, and now it's a deal. It's hard to say. It goes back to a little bit what we talked about yesterday. I don't know what the TV landscape looks like in the future, and that could certainly affect things. It seems to be what affected the prices last offseason. You remember last offseason, Jordan Montgomery, Blake Snell couldn't find a deal. And a lot of that, I think, was due to the uncertainty of TV contracts. And I think there's still some uncertainty in that going forward. So again, and I think there's very few teams that can spend to the level that we saw spent on a Shohei Ohtani and a Juan Soto. There are 3, 4, 5 teams that are willing to spend to that level. So I think it's a situation where you had an offseason last year where not a lot of teams wanted to spend and there was a lot of uncertainty. And now I think you had this offseason with a little bit more clarity and certainty on the situation. You're seeing teams that are just more willing to spend. So I could see it balancing out a little bit, but with inflation, prices are always going to go up, and that's going to be part of it. Annoying Braves fan, what are your reasonable expectations for Acuna returning from ACL? Do you think he learned from his last rehab and comes out stronger than he did in 2022? I mean, look, you hate the fact that he's had 2 ACL injuries because we just don't know how that's going to affect him as a player. In 2022, when he came back, he clearly wasn't trusting that knee and he wasn't getting the lift on the baseball. Before he got injured in 2024, it felt like that same thing. Like he just wasn't trusting that knee and he wasn't getting the lift on the baseball. He's still hitting the baseball extremely hard. He just wasn't getting that lift on the baseball. The baseballs also weren't carrying the first 2 to 3 months of the season, and that didn't help. Look, I'm not trying to straddle the fence on this. I just don't know. And I don't think anybody knows what Acuna is going to look like. But I'll be honest, if I get the 2022 version, I'm still okay with that. I know it's not the Acuna that we all want, but give me somebody with a 120 WRC plus that, can play at the top of the lineup. I guess he had a 115 WRC plus in 2022. He hit 266, still had a 351 on base, and still stole 29 bags. I think the part of that we just don't know is can he still steal 30 bags? I mean, if Acuna becomes a guy that walks 10% of the time, steals 30 bases, scores 100 runs, and maybe it's 20 to 30 home runs instead of 30 to 40 home runs, and it's a 120 to 130 WRC plus, I mean, that's still a really good player. It's not the MVP anymore. I have no expectations for Acuna. I hope 2022 is the floor for what we see from him in 2025. I hope that's the floor, but we honestly just don't know. We're talking about a guy that's had both knees surgically repaired. Can he run? To what degree can he run? We just don't know. Last question on social media here from Justin Shoemake, who says, why do you not see players nowadays want to stay with the team that drafted them, even if it meant taking a little less like Chipper did? I look at it as they took a chance on me right out of high school and wanted me to, so I'm going to reward them by staying and taking a little less. I think that's a complicated question to answer in the last minute here of the podcast, but I think there are players like that and there are situations like that. I think, Freddie certainly would. I'm not going to go down that road. Freddie would have done that, should have done that. Dansby would have done that, should have done that. But you're talking about just a huge gap in money. Part of it is that there just is more money. And if you get to free agency, like Chipper himself said, you get to free agency, you're going to have all these suitors. I think he used more colorful terms when he used this analogy, but you're going to have all these suitors coming after you and they're going to look pretty and you're going to want to go after them. The thing with Chipper is he just never let it get to that point. And he read up before it got to that point. Freddie should have been done before it got to that point. Dansby should have been done before it got to that point. Max should have been done before it got to that point. And it's just, you get to free agency, the chance of you going back to that team is very slim. It just doesn't happen very often because you're going to have other teams who are going to be bidding for you and they're going to be telling you why they think you're this valuable. While your current team is saying, we don't think you're that valuable. You're going to have to take less to come play for us. That's not something that anybody wants to hear, but it's the truth of the matter, and it's the way that it is. And the other part of that is just, it's hard to have a team that is competitive for 15, 20 years. And as a player, you want to be with a team that's competitive. So there may be a window there where their team's just not competitive. And so they're going to trade you for their benefit and for your benefit. And that's why I just think you don't see it happen quite as much. SoCal Brave says, Jake, what do you think about trading for Matz? We talked about the Cardinals pitchers yesterday. Of the Cardinals pitchers, Michaelis, Matz, and Fetty, I would rather go after Fetty. I think you have a little bit better idea what you're going to get from him, and he's cheaper in terms of money and probably prospect cost, although I don't think take a lot of prospects to get Matz either. Mass boost, you might move Baldwin for a shortstop. What's shortstop, though? I don't know. I don't think I would move him straight up for Bo Bichette unless I'm getting an extension on Bichette. I don't know. I think I just said Bichette, but maybe I would do that deal. I have to think about that one a little bit more, but that'd be really risky trading for a guy in Bichette who hasn't been great defensively at shortstop, coming off a terrible year. Obviously, there's some injuries and stuff that went into that, and you're only getting him for one season, and it's a pretty big number. I think it's $16 million that you're paying him. So other than that, I just don't know what other shortstops are out there that I would trade Drake Baldwin for. All right. Thank you so much for joining me on today's podcast. Krusty, Doug Abelli in here, Francisco Othen, Wed on base, Mass Boost, some new names in here this afternoon that I don't recognize. BC is one I do recognize in here. Thank you for joining. Marquise Barge, Monty 2K, Sergio, thank you all for being here with me on a Friday afternoon for this mailbag edition of a Locked On Braves. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. If you're new, hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Subscribe or follow us on social media at shortstopball, at LockedOn_Braves. Thanks as always for making this your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen, and make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next